They say the Alpha King has not slept in 4 months. They say his wolves patrol every road, every village, every forgotten trail in the realm of Valdenmere, searching for a woman whose name he will not speak. They say his eyes have turned from burnished gold to something darker, something feral, something that makes even his most hardened commanders lower their gaze and step backward when he enters a room. They say the land itself is dying because of it. Crops withering in fields that were green a season ago. Rivers running low. Livestock refusing to breed. As though the earth can feel its king unraveling and has decided to unravel with him. But none of them know why. None of them know about the woman who stood in the shadows of the great hall on the night of the choosing, her hand pressed against her stomach where 2 lives already grew in secret, watching the man she loved reach for someone else. Her name was Iseleth Marvain. And this is the story of how she disappeared, and how the most powerful alpha in 5 generations burned his own kingdom to the ground trying to bring her back. 4 months earlier, the great hall of Ashenmoor Keep blazed with 10,000 candles. Every noble house in Valdenmere had sent representatives to witness the choosing, the ancient ceremony in which the Alpha King would select his queen from among the daughters of the 5 ruling families. It was a tradition older than the keep itself, older than the bloodlines that now competed for the crown. Iseleth was not supposed to be there. She was not a daughter of the 5 houses. She was the orphan child of a border healer, raised by an aunt who cleaned linens in the keep's lower quarters. She had no title, no lands, and no political value whatsoever. What she had was a secret that could shatter the political landscape of the entire realm. 7 months ago, Draven Ashenmoor, Alpha King of Valdenmere, had found her bleeding in the northern forest after a rogue wolf attack. He had carried her to his private chambers. He had stayed at her bedside for 3 days while she healed. And on the 4th night, when she had tried to leave, he had caught her wrist and spoken words that no Alpha King had ever spoken to a commoner. "You are my fated mate, Iseleth. I knew it the moment I touched you. My wolf has known it longer." She had not believed him. Not at first. But Draven was not a man who made declarations lightly. Over the following months, he had proven it in secret, meeting her in the hidden passages beneath the keep, in the moonlit clearings of the northern forest, in the quiet hours before dawn when the world belonged only to them. He had given her his claiming mark, a bite on the curve of her left shoulder, hidden beneath her clothes, invisible to everyone but searing with warmth whenever he was near. It was the most sacred bond a wolf could offer, a promise written in blood and instinct that could never be undone. "The council demands a political match," he had told her, his forehead pressed against hers in the darkness. "But I will find a way. After the choosing, I will announce you. I will make them accept it. You will be my queen, Iseleth. I swear it on my bloodline." She had believed him then. Now, standing in the eastern gallery above the great hall, her fingers white-knuckled on the stone railing, she watched 5 women in ceremonial white ascend the dais steps, each one a daughter of power, each one trained from infancy for this exact moment. And at their center, radiant as a winter moon, walked Sirene Delvain. The crowd murmured its approval. The Delvains were the oldest house in Valdenmere, their bloodline intertwined with the crown for centuries. Sirene was considered the obvious choice, a woman of stunning beauty with pale silver hair and eyes like frozen amethyst. Iseleth's mark burned, not with warmth, with pain. Something was wrong. Draven stood on the dais in ceremonial black, his broad shoulders rigid, his jaw locked. He looked like a statue carved from granite. His eyes, those golden eyes that had softened only for her, stared straight ahead with an emptiness that made her stomach lurch. The High Elder spoke the ancient words. The 5 candidates knelt. And then the question that had been asked of every Alpha King for 1,000 years echoed through the hall. "Whom do you choose?" Draven's mouth opened. His voice emerged flat, mechanical, stripped of every quality that made it his. Sirène Delvain. The hall erupted. Cheers, applause, the stamping of feet. Siren rose with a smile that could have cut glass and extended her hand to the king. He took it, and Isoleth felt something inside her chest crack so completely that she was certain it must have been audible. Her claiming mark blazed with agony, a searing white-hot brand that sent her stumbling backward against the gallery wall. She pressed her hand over her mouth to trap the sob that fought to escape. But it was his eyes that destroyed her. In the brief moment before Sirene's fingers closed around his, Draven's gaze flickered upward. Found her. And in those golden depths, she saw something that haunted her for every day that followed. Terror. Absolute drowning terror. As though he were screaming behind glass that no one could hear. Then Sirene touched him, and the emptiness returned. His eyes went flat. His hand closed around the Delvain woman's fingers, and he turned away. Isoleth ran. She did not pack. She did not leave a note. She did not stop to think about what she was doing or where she was going. She simply ran. Through the servants' corridors she had memorized during 7 months of secret meetings. Down the narrow staircase behind the kitchens. Through the postern gate that the night guards always left unlatched because it led only to the compost yards and nobody ever used it. The cold hit her like a wall. It was deep autumn in Valdenmere, and the northern wind carried the first promise of frost. She wore only the thin dress she had chosen to watch the ceremony, a dress she had foolishly picked because Draven once said he loved the way green looked against her dark hair. She ran until her lungs burned, until the lights of Ashenmore Keep were nothing but a faint amber glow behind the tree line, until her legs gave out beneath her on the bank of the Silverthorn River, and she collapsed into the frost-hardened grass with a sound that was part scream, part prayer, part something so raw it had no name. Her mark was still burning, not fading, not cooling, and burning, as though someone had pressed a coal against her shoulder and held it there. She pressed both hands to her stomach, where nearly 3 months of impossible hope grew in silence. "I will not go back," she whispered to the 2 lives that did not yet know the world was cruel. "I will not let them take you. I will not let them know you exist." Because she understood now, with the brutal clarity that only devastation can provide, what would happen if anyone discovered that the Alpha King's true mate, his secret, common-born mate, carried his heirs. The political implications alone would ignite a civil war. The 5 houses would tear Valdenmere apart fighting over whether the children were legitimate. And the Delvains, who had just secured the crown through Sirene, would make certain that neither Isoleth nor her children survived to complicate their claim. She had to disappear. Completely. Permanently. By dawn, she had reached the eastern trade road. By nightfall of the 2nd day, she had bartered her silver hairpin, the one Draven had given her, for a seat on a merchant's wagon heading south. By the end of the week, she had crossed into the Grey March, the vast stretch of unclaimed territory between Valdenmere and the southern Wolf Kingdoms, where no Alpha's authority held sway. She found work in a village called Thornhaven, a place so small it appeared on no official maps. The local healer had died the previous winter, and when Isoleth demonstrated the medicinal knowledge her mother had taught her before the border raid that claimed her parents' lives, the villagers welcomed her without question. She called herself Wren. She told no one where she came from. She cut her long dark hair to her shoulders and wore high-collared dresses that covered the mark on her shoulder. And she tried, with every fiber of her being, to forget the golden-eyed king who had promised her the world and then chosen someone else. She failed. Every single night she failed, because the mark would not stop burning. 3 months after she fled Ashenmore Keep, Isoleth's belly had grown round enough that she could no longer hide it beneath loose clothing. The women of Thornhaven noticed, of course. They asked careful questions with kind eyes. She told them her mate had died in a border skirmish, and they believed her, because grief was common in the Grey March, and nobody pressed a widow for details. She had built something resembling a life. Her cottage sat at the edge of the village, backed against the wending forest, close enough to the tree line that she could slip into the woods if she ever needed to run again. She grew herbs in window boxes. She treated fevers, set bones, brewed tinctures for the farmers' aching joints. The villagers called her Healer Wren and brought her bread and preserves in payment. It was almost enough. But at night, when the cottage was quiet and the fire burned low, the mark on her shoulder would flare with such intensity that she would gasp awake, drenched in sweat, certain she could feel him. Not just a general awareness, something specific, something directional, as though there were an invisible thread stitched between her shoulder and his chest, and someone was pulling it taut. And there was something else. Something she could not explain and dared not examine too closely. Her skin was changing. It started around the mark itself. Faint lines, almost invisible, that traced outward from the claiming bite like the branches of a winter tree. At first she thought it was scarring, some delayed reaction to the bond being strained by distance. But the lines were too precise, too deliberate. They formed patterns that reminded her of the illuminated manuscripts she had seen in the keep's library, ancient texts written in a language that predated the wolf kingdoms. By the third month, the patterns had spread across her entire left shoulder and down her arm to the elbow. They did not hurt. They glowed faintly in the dark, a soft golden luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. She hid them. She hid everything. Until the evening, a stranger rode into Thornhaven on a lathered horse, carrying news that turned her blood to ice. "The king has gone mad," the rider announced to the gathered villagers at the tavern, his voice carrying through the open window to where Isoleth stood frozen in the street. "Draven Ashenmore has lost his mind. He tore apart the choosing betrothal 3 weeks after the ceremony, renounced Seren Delvain in front of the entire court. The Delvains are calling it an act of war." Isoleth's legs nearly buckled. She pressed her hand against the cottage wall for support. "That is not the worst of it," the rider continued. "He has sent wolves to every corner of Valdenmere searching for someone. A woman. He will not say her name, will not describe her, and will not explain why. He has executed 2 advisors who tried to stop him. The realm is in chaos. The southern provinces are threatening to secede." "And the land?" someone asked. The rider's face darkened. "Dying. The crops failed in the Central Valley last month. The herds are scattering. They say it is the king's bond. That he was connected to someone, truly bonded, and the separation is destroying him. And when an alpha king of the Ashenmore line breaks, the land breaks with him." Isoleth made it inside her cottage before her knees gave way. He was looking for her. He had rejected Sirene. He was tearing the kingdom apart. But he chose her. She saw it with her own eyes, heard his voice speak Sirene's name, watched his hand close around the Delvain woman's fingers, unless he did not choose at all. The memory surfaced like a body rising from deep water. His eyes in that single, fractured moment before Sirene touched him. The terror. The screaming silence behind glass. What if it was not a choice? Her mark flared so violently that she cried out, and in the warm glow that erupted from the patterns on her arm, she saw something she had never seen before. Letters, forming in the light, hovering above her skin for just an instant before dissolving. She could not read them, but she understood, in a place deeper than language, deeper than thought, what they meant. "He is calling you." She did not go. Not because she did not want to. Every cell in her body screamed to go north, to cross back into Valdenmere, to find him and demand answers. But she was 6 months pregnant with twins whose existence could ignite a war, and the rational part of her mind, the part that had kept her alive this long, refused to let the desperate part win. Instead, she fortified. She stored food. She mapped escape routes through the wending forest. She continued treating villagers and asked no more questions about the Alpha King, but the news kept coming. A merchant passing through reported that Draven had burned the Delvane estate to the ground after Lord Aldrich Delvane refused to tell him where the woman had gone. Seren had fled to her cousin's holding in the western mountains. 3 of the 5 ruling houses had withdrawn from court entirely. A week later, a traveling blacksmith mentioned that the king's wolves had been spotted in the Grey March. Not just scouts, entire patrols, moving systematically through every settlement, carrying something, a piece of fabric, a scent marker that they pressed to every doorway. Isoleth's blood ran cold. She reinforced the herbal sachets she kept around her cottage, the ones that masked wolf scent. She brewed stronger ones, pressing dried moonwort and bitter elm into every seam of her clothing. It would not be enough. She knew it would not be enough. A fated bond could not be hidden by herbs forever. But she had to try. For the twins. The weeks crawled past. 6 months became 7. Then, on a rain-soaked evening in her 7th month of pregnancy, she opened her cottage door to find a wolf standing in her garden. Not a wild wolf. A shifted wolf. Enormous, gray-furred, with intelligent, tawny eyes that studied her with unmistakable recognition. She reached for the knife she kept beside the door. The wolf shifted. Where the animal had stood, a man now knelt in the rain, mud-streaked and exhausted, wearing the tattered remains of what had once been a commander's surcoat bearing the Ashenmoor crest. "Healer Wren," he said. His voice shook. Or should I say, Isoleth Marvain. Her grip tightened on the knife. "I do not know that name." "You do." He raised his hands, palms open. "My name is Brennick. I am the king's commander. I have been searching for you for 93 days. His eyes dropped to her swollen belly. Something cracked in his expression. "Goddess above, he does not know, does he?" "There is nothing to know. You have the wrong woman. The mark on your left shoulder says otherwise." He met her gaze steadily. "I am not here to take you anywhere against your will, but I need you to hear what I have to say before you decide to run again. Because if you run, I fear there will be no realm left to run through." She let him in, not because she trusted him, but because the rain was turning to sleet and he was shivering so badly his teeth chattered, and the healer in her could not leave any creature suffering on her doorstep. She gave him dry clothes. She set water to boil. She sat across the kitchen table from him, with the knife still within arm's reach, and said, "Talk." Brennick wrapped both hands around the mug she placed before him and spoke for nearly an hour without stopping. "He did not choose Siren," he began. "What you saw that night was not Draven. It was his body, controlled by a covenant of silence." Isoleth's breath caught. She had heard the term before, in the old stories her mother used to tell. A covenant of silence was blood magic, forbidden magic, the kind that had been outlawed in the wolf kingdoms for 3 centuries. It required the blood of the target, a binding agent, and a caster willing to sacrifice a piece of their own life force to fuel the spell. It imprisoned the victim's consciousness inside their own body, while an external will controlled their speech and movements. "Lord Aldrich Delvane," she said. "Lord Aldrich Delvane," Brennick confirmed. He had been planning it for years. He obtained Draven's blood through the royal physician, who owed Aldrich a blood debt. The binding agent was woven into the ceremonial robes Draven wore that night. By the time the choosing began, the king was a prisoner inside his own skin. Isoleth's hand rose to her mouth. The memory of his eyes, that flash of screaming terror, slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. He had been trying to tell her. In the only moment the compulsion slipped, for that single heartbeat before Sereni's touch reinforced the spell, he had looked up and tried to scream her name through glass. "The covenant broke 3 weeks later," Brennick continued. "They always break eventually. The cost to the caster is too great to sustain. When Draven woke, truly woke, Inside his own mind again, the first word out of his mouth was your name. Brennick's voice dropped. What followed was the worst night any of us have ever witnessed. He went to your chamber. Found it empty. Your scent. Days old. He tracked it to the postern gate, then lost it at the river. He paused. He shifted and did not shift back for 6 days. His wolf nearly consumed him entirely. When he finally returned to human form, he was a different man. Colder. Harder. And absolutely, irrevocably determined to find you. He burned the Delvane estate, Isoleth said. Aye, after Aldrich laughed in his face and told him you had probably thrown yourself in the river. Yes. He burned it to the foundation stones. Brennick met her eyes. But it is not just rage driving him, Isoleth. It is the bond. An alpha king of the Ashenmoor bloodline is tied to the land itself. When the bond with his true mate is severed, his power becomes unstable, destructive. The failing crops, the dying herds, the rivers running low, that is not a curse. That is Draven. His grief is bleeding into the earth. The patterns on her arm flared with sudden light. Brennick's eyes went wide. What in the name of the goddess is that? She pulled her sleeve down. Nothing. That was not nothing. Those markings, I have seen something like them before. In the Ashenmoor archives. They are bond script. The old language. The one that existed before wolves learned to speak. It manifests when a fated bond is strong enough to transcend distance. He stared at her. No living wolf has produced bond script in over 400 years. Before Isoleth could respond, a sound split the night. Not a howl. Worse. A roar that shook the walls of the cottage and sent the tea mug sliding off the table to shatter on the floor. A sound that was part wolf and part something older. Something elemental. As though the earth itself had opened its throat and screamed. Brennick went white. That is not possible. He could not have tracked me this fast. The front door exploded inward. He filled the doorway like a storm-given flesh. Draven Ashenmoor stood in the wreckage of her cottage door, rain streaming down his face, his eyes blazing with a gold so intense they cast light across the floor. He was thinner than she remembered, harder. The elegant composure she had known was gone, replaced by something raw and barely contained, a predator operating on the fraying edge of control. His gaze locked onto her and did not move. For 3 heartbeats, nobody breathed. Then his eyes dropped to her belly, to the unmistakable, undeniable curve of 7 months of pregnancy carrying his children. The sound that escaped him was not a word. It was a fractured, guttural thing, a sound that bypassed language entirely and communicated something so purely agonized that Isoleth felt it in her own chest like a second heartbeat. Isoleth. Her name in his mouth was a wound. You are alive. You need to leave. Her voice came out steadier than her hands. You should not be here. I have torn apart a kingdom to be here. He took a step forward. The floorboards groaned under his weight. You are carrying my children and you ask me to leave? You chose Seren Delvane in front of 5,000 wolves. You took her hand. You spoke her name. A blood covenant spoke her name. His voice cracked on the words. My body chose her. My mind was screaming yours. Brennick stepped forward carefully. My king, she did not know. About the covenant. About any of it. Draven's gaze never left Isoleth's face. I know she did not know, because I failed to protect her from it. I failed to protect her from all of it. He took another step. 4 months. You were alone for 4 months. Pregnant, hiding, believing I betrayed you. And I could not even tell you the truth because a dead man's magic held my tongue. Aldrich Delvane is dead? His estate is ash. He drew a blade when my wolves came for him. I gave him a cleaner death than he deserved. Something terrible moved behind his eyes. His daughter escaped. She is raising support in the western mountains. 3 houses have declared against the crown. Valdenmere is fracturing, and I do not care, Isoleth. I do not care about any of it. I came for you. The patterns on her arm erupted with light so bright that all 3 of them flinched. The burnished glow spread across the room, casting shifting shadows on the walls, and in its illumination, the ancient script pulsed with a rhythm that matched perfectly the beating of Draven's heart. He stared at her arm, at the bond script crawling across her skin, and for the first time since he had shattered her door, the feral edge in his expression softened into something that looked like reverence. Bond script, he whispered. The old language. It only manifests when the bond is unbreakable. He raised his own hand, pushed back his sleeve, and there, tracing the same patterns, the same ancient letters, was a mirror of her markings. I have them too. They appeared the night I woke from the covenant. They have been burning ever since. Isoleth felt tears spill down her cheeks before she registered that she was crying. I thought you chose her, she said. I thought everything was a lie. Nothing was a lie. Not a single moment. Not a single word. He crossed the remaining distance between them and dropped to his knees before her. The Alpha King of Valdenmere, on his knees on the floor of a healer's cottage in a village that appeared on no maps, pressing his forehead to her swollen belly where his children grew. I will spend every day of my life making this right, but first, I need you to come home. Valdenmere is not safe. Nowhere is safe while we are apart. The land is dying, Isoleth. I am dying. And if the bond script is correct, he looked up, his golden eyes wet. You are the only one who can stop it. She did not agree immediately. She was not a woman who made decisions from her knees, and she would not start now, no matter how many tears the Alpha King shed on her kitchen floor. Sirene Delvain is raising an army, she said. 3 houses support her. I am a commoner carrying illegitimate heirs. Walking into Ashenmore Keep is not a homecoming. It is a death sentence. My children are not illegitimate. The claiming mark precedes the choosing. By the old laws, the laws that existed before the 5 houses rewrote them to serve their own interests. A fated bond supersedes any political arrangement. The old laws have not been invoked in 2 centuries. Then I will invoke them. I am still the king. A king without a functioning kingdom. Something flickered in his expression. Not anger. Admiration. You always did refuse to let me be romantic without pointing out the logistical flaws. Despite everything, despite the shattered door and the ruined months and the impossible situation, she almost smiled. Brennick cleared his throat. If I may, there is a more immediate problem. The wolves who accompanied me are still a day's ride north. I came ahead alone because I caught Isoleth's scent and could not risk a larger party alerting anyone. But Sirene has scouts in the Grey March. If the king's presence is detected here, this village becomes a target. Draven stood. The softness vanished, replaced by the cold, tactical mind that had made him Alpha King at 23. How many scouts? At least 2 patrols of 6. They have been shadowing our search parties for weeks, reporting our movements back to the Western Alliance. Then we move tonight. Draven turned to Isoleth. I will not force you. I have never forced you to do anything, and I never will. But I am asking you to trust me one more time. She looked at him, at the man who had held her in moonlit forests and whispered promises that a blood covenant had prevented him from keeping, at the bond script on his arm that matched her own, at the desperate, exhausted, half-feral king who had literally set fire to his own realm because losing her was worse than losing everything else. One more time, she said. But Draven, if you are wrong about the old laws, if the houses do not accept this, I will take our children and disappear so thoroughly that no wolf in Valdenmere will ever find a trace of us. If the houses do not accept this, he said quietly, there will be no houses left to object. They left Thornhaven within the hour. The journey north took 4 days, slowed by Isoleth's condition and the need to avoid Delvain scouts. Draven refused to let her ride for more than 3 hours at a stretch, dismounting constantly to check the road ahead and circling back in wolf form to ensure they were not being followed. On the second night, camped in a sheltered ravine with Brennick standing watch on the ridge above, he told her everything. The Delvains had been planning the covenant for 3 years. Lord Aldrich had discovered, through the corrupted royal physician, that Draven had formed a secret bond. He did not know with whom, only that it existed. The covenant was designed not just to force the choosing, but to permanently sever whatever bond Draven had formed, replacing it with a compulsion loyalty to Sirene. It should have worked, Draven said, staring into the fire. Every text on Blood Covenant says the original bond should have dissolved once I spoke another woman's name at the choosing. That is how the magic functions. It overwrites. But it did not. It did not. He looked at her. Because fated bonds cannot be overwritten. The covenant forced my body. It controlled my voice. But it could not touch the bond itself. The old magic, the true bond between us, simply refused to die. Isoleth pressed her hand to the marks on her arm. They were warm, steady, present. The bond script, she said. Brennick said no living wolf has produced it in 4 centuries. The last recorded case was Queen Ethris Ashenmore and her mate, Corvain. During the siege of the Sunken Vale, they were separated for 2 years. The bond script kept them connected across the distance. When they reunited, the script merged into a single pattern on both their skins, and their combined power broke the siege in a single night. You think our bond script can do something similar? I think our bond script is why the land is reacting to our separation. The Ashenmore bloodline is tied to Valdenmere. The bond between the king and his true mate is what keeps that connection stable. When you left, the connection shattered. The land felt it. So I am not just your mate. I am the anchor. You have always been the anchor, Isoleth. I was simply too arrogant to tell the world before it was too late. On the 3rd morning, they were ambushed. Delvain wolves, 12 of them, burst from the tree line in coordinated formation. Brennick's warning howl came half a second before the first attacker reached them. Draven shifted mid-stride. His wolf was enormous, black-furred, and radiating a dominance so crushing that 4 of the attacking wolves stumbled and dropped to their bellies involuntarily. He tore through the remaining 8 with a savagery that Isoleth had never witnessed, had never imagined he was capable of. But there were too many, and they had planned well. While Draven engaged the main group, 2 wolves circled behind. Isoleth saw them coming. She had no weapon. She had no combat training. She was 7 months pregnant and standing in a muddy forest clearing with nothing but her own hands. The bond script ignited. Not a gentle glow this time. A detonation. Amber light erupted from her arm in a shockwave that sent both attacking wolves tumbling backward through the air. They hit the trees 20 feet away and did not get up. Draven spun, stared. Even in wolf form, his shock was visible. The light did not fade. It spread, crawling up her arm, across her shoulder, down her other arm. The ancient script blazed like liquid fire beneath her skin, and where it touched the air, reality seemed to bend. The rain falling around her changed direction, curving away from her body as though deflected by an invisible shield. Then, as quickly as it had come, the light receded. Isoleth swayed. Draven shifted back to human form and caught her before she fell. "What was that?" she whispered. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with fierce recognition. Soul fire, the power of the Ashenmore bond made manifest. He held her tighter. The texts said it was a myth. Clearly they were wrong. From the ridge above, Brennick called down. "The scouts are neutralized, but they will have sent word. We need to move, now." They reached the borders of Valdenmere on the fourth morning to find the kingdom in worse condition than the reports had suggested. The fields they passed were gray and brittle, as though autumn had decayed directly into death without passing through winter. The villages were half empty. Their residents fled south to the Grey March or west to join the Delvane alliance. Ashenmore Keep rose from the northern hills like a clenched fist of black stone. As they approached, wolves emerged from the gates, dozens of them, lining the road in silent formation, not threatening, waiting. When they saw Isileth at Draven's side, something changed. A ripple passed through the gathered wolves, a shudder of recognition that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with instinct. Several of them lowered their heads. Two sank to the ground in full submission. "They can feel it," Brennick murmured. "The bond. The land recognizes her." Inside the keep, the situation was dire. Draven's remaining loyal advisors numbered fewer than a dozen. The treasury was strained by the months of search operations. And waiting in the Great Hall, flanked by armed guards, was a delegation from the Western Alliance bearing Siren Delvane's terms. Isileth read the message before Draven could stop her. Siren demanded the crown. She claimed that the choosing was legally binding regardless of the covenant, that Draven's renunciation was an act of madness, and that his common-born mistress and her bastard children had no claim to anything. If Draven did not surrender the throne within 7 days, the 3 allied houses would march on Ashenmore Keep. "She does not know about the bond script," Isileth said. "No." "She does not know about the soul fire." "No one does. Until 4 days ago, I did not know about it either." Isileth set the message down, looked at the room full of exhausted advisors, depleted guards, and one alpha king who had been slowly destroying himself for 4 months. "Then we have 7 days," she said, "to show her what she is actually fighting against." For 6 days, Isileth did not rest. She worked with the keep's archivists, pulling every text on the Ashenmore bloodline, on bond script, on the old laws that predated the 5 houses' political restructuring. She found what she needed in a crumbling manuscript stored in a vault beneath the library that had not been opened in over a century. The old laws were unambiguous. A fated bond, confirmed by mutual claiming marks and witnessed by bond script, superseded every political arrangement in Valdenmere's legal framework. It was not a loophole. It was the foundation upon which the entire monarchy rested. The 5 houses had simply buried it because it threatened their ability to control succession through arranged matches. More importantly, she found a passage about soulfire that stopped her cold. "The soulfire is the bond-made weapon," she read aloud to Draven in the dim light of the archive vault. "It cannot be summoned by will. It cannot be controlled by training. It manifests only in defense of the bond itself, and its power is proportional to the strength of the connection between mates. When both mates bear the old script and both hearts beat in unity, the soul fire becomes absolute. No blood magic can stand against it." She looked up. "It is not just a shield, it is a counter to the covenant. If the soul fire can destroy blood magic, and Siren's entire claim rests on the covenant being legitimate, then proving the covenant was blood magic, and demonstrating that the true bond survived it, invalidates everything the Delvanes built." On the 7th day, Siren Delvane rode to Ashenmore Keep at the head of 3,000 wolves. She expected surrender. She expected a broken king and a cowering commoner. What she found was the Great Hall, the same hall where the choosing had taken place 4 months earlier, blazing once more with countless candles and filled with every remaining loyal wolf in Valdenmere. And at the center of the dais, standing side by side, Draven Ashenmore and Isileth Marvane. Siren's composure fractured for exactly 1 second when she saw Isileth's belly. She recovered quickly, her frozen amethyst eyes hardening to stone. "You drag a pregnant commoner before the court and expect this to end your troubles." Her voice rang through the hall. The choosing was conducted under sacred law. You spoke my name. The bond is sealed. The bond is a lie, Draven replied. Sealed by your father's blood magic. My father is dead. You murdered him. Your father attacked the crown, but his magic left evidence. Draven raised his arm, pushed back his sleeve. The bond script blazed in the candlelight, drawing gasps from every corner of the hall. This is bond script, the language of the true bond. It has not been seen in Valdenmere for 400 years. And it appeared the night your father's covenant shattered, because the real bond, the one he tried to destroy, could not be broken. Siren's wolves stirred uneasily. This was not what they had been told to expect. Parlor tricks, Sireni said, but her voice had lost its edge. Painted skin and dramatics. Isoleth stepped forward. Then test it, she said. The hall went silent. You claim the choosing was legitimate, that the covenant was merely a political agreement, not blood magic. If that is true, then the soul fire of a fated bond should not exist. It should be impossible. She raised her own arm, where the bond script pulsed in perfect synchronization with Draven's. But if it does exist, if it manifests here, in front of every wolf in this hall, then your claim is built on blood magic, and by the old laws which I have pulled from your own ancestors' archives, it is void. Sireni's face drained of color. The old laws are obsolete. The old laws are the foundation of the monarchy you are trying to claim. You cannot invoke the choosing and reject the legal framework that created it. Draven took Isoleth's hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, the bond script on both their arms erupted. Amber light flooded the great hall, so bright that wolves shielded their eyes, so warm that the bitter chill that had hung over Ashenmoor for months evaporated in an instant. The ancient script lifted from their skin and spiraled upward, merging above their heads into a single, blazing glyph that even the oldest elder in the hall recognized. The seal of a true bond, unbroken, unbreakable. And in its light, every wolf in the hall felt it. The bond. The connection between king and mate that ran through the earth itself, the heartbeat of Valdenmere made visible. The gray sickness that had been choking the land shuddered, cracked, and began to recede like frost before a sunrise. Sirene screamed at her wolves to attack. They did not move. Not one. The soul fire was not just light. It was dominance, authority, and truth, compressed into a single radiant point, and no wolf in its presence could raise a hand against the bond it represented. One by one, Sirene's 3,000 wolves knelt. Sirena stood alone in the center of the great hall, surrounded by her own army prostrate on the floor, staring at the pregnant commoner whose hand glowed with the light of an ancient power that her father's blood magic had tried and failed to extinguish. It is over, Sirena, Draven said. Not with cruelty, with exhaustion. Your father's covenant failed. The bond survived. Valdenmere recognizes its true queen. Sirena ran. Nobody stopped her. The twins were born 31 days later on the last morning of winter in the royal chambers of Ashenmoor Keep. A boy and a girl. The boy had his father's golden eyes and his mother's dark hair. The girl had Isoleth's quiet intensity and a grip strong enough to make the royal midwife laugh in surprise. They named the boy Thalric and the girl Aithara, after the ancient queen whose bond script had last been seen 4 centuries ago. Isoleth held them both against her chest and felt, for the first time in nearly a year, the mark on her shoulder settle into something that was neither pain nor burning but warmth. Simple, steady warmth. The kind that meant home. The realm began to heal the day she returned to Ashenmoor, but the morning the twins were born, the recovery accelerated beyond anything the Elder Council had seen. Green shoots pushed through the gray fields overnight. The rivers ran full. The livestock, the ones that remained, began producing again. as though the land itself had taken a long-held breath and finally released it. The coronation took place 1 week later. Not a choosing, not a political arrangement, but a bonding ceremony under the old laws, the first in 2 centuries. Draven placed the queen's circlet on Isoleth's head in the same great hall where she had once hidden in the shadows, watching him speak another woman's name. "I should have told the world the moment I found you in that forest," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I should have defied the council, ignored the houses, and put this crown on your head 7 months before a dead man's magic tried to take you from me. I failed you then. I will not fail you again." She looked up at him, at the king who had burned a kingdom rather than accept a world without her in it, at the father of her children, at the man whose bond script matched her own, whose heartbeat she could feel beneath her skin. "You did not fail me," she said. "You found me." The hall erupted, not with the polite applause of political theater, but with the raw, full-throated howl of wolves recognizing their queen. Thousands of voices merged into a sound that shook the walls of Ashenmore Keep and carried across the kingdom, across the Grey March, across every corner of the realm that had felt the king's grief and now felt his joy. 6 months later, on a warm spring evening, Isoleth stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sun set over a kingdom she had never expected to call home. Below her, the gardens of Ashenmore Keep bloomed with flowers that the head gardener swore had never grown in Valdenmere before. Gold and amber, the colors of soul fire, spreading in wild patterns through the carefully maintained beds as though the land itself was celebrating. Inside, Draven sat on the floor with Thalric in one arm and Ithera in the other, attempting to read a treaty document while both infants tried to eat the parchment. He was losing badly and did not seem to mind. Seren Delvain had been exiled to the far southern wastes with a handful of loyal followers. Reports said she had settled in a remote village and taken work as a seamstress. Whether she plotted revenge or simply tried to rebuild a life without the power she had been raised to expect, no one knew. Isoleth found that she did not particularly care. The bond script had faded after the coronation, settling back beneath their skin like ink absorbed into parchment. It was still there, still warm, still present, but no longer blazing. The archivist said it meant the bond was at rest. Complete. No longer fighting to survive. Isoleth pressed her hand to the mark on her shoulder. It had not burned since the night of the soul fire. "You are thinking again," Draven called from inside. "I can feel it through the bond." "I am thinking about Thornhaven," she said, "about the life I built there, the cottage, the herb garden, the villagers who called me Healer Wren and never asked where I came from." He appeared in the doorway, a twin tucked under each arm like sacks of grain, his expression carefully neutral. "Do you miss it?" She turned to face him. The golden light of sunset caught the faint trace of bond script still visible on her wrist, and for a moment, it glowed. "I miss the version of me that believed she had to survive alone," she said. "But I do not want to be her again." He crossed the balcony and stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, close enough that the twins between them reached for each other and tangled their small fingers together. "I burn the realm for you," he murmured. "I know. I would do it again." She leaned her head against his shoulder. Below them, the kingdom of Valdenmere stretched green and whole to the horizon, healed by a bond that blood magic could not break and distance could not diminish. "You will not have to," she said. And in the warmth of the fading sun, with her children's laughter rising like music around her, Isoleth Marvain, the orphaned healer from the border, the woman who vanished the night the Alpha King chose another, closed her eyes and let herself believe it. Thank you so much for listening to our story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves a good love story. Drop a comment telling me, would you have forgiven Draven, or would you have stayed in Thornhaven? I would love to hear what you think. Until next time.